All right, a very good afternoon, everybody. How are you guys doing? What's up? What's up? What's up? Um, Let me just check if we're live or not, and then we'll begin with the lesson for the day. Yes, we are live. Okay, cool. Um, so yeah, today I'm back with another session, totally curated to our preparation for the XAT exam, for the impending XAT exam. Before we begin with the drill, though, allow me to quickly take you through an introduction of the Unacademy platform, the Unacademy portal. Right. So, Unacademy is India's largest learning platform when it comes to any kind of test preparation, any kind of preparation for competitive exams. Um, this YouTube channel is particularly targeted at your management exams, exams such as your CAT, GMAT, and MAT, and the likes. I am Prankur Arora. I am essentially going to be your instructor on this journey of learning, wherein I'll be wherein I'll be presiding over various aspects pertaining to the verbal ability as well as the reading comprehension portions of these exams. I've been a trainer, I've been a coach, a mentor, essentially been in the learning industry for a better part of the last couple of years, where I've even had the opportunity to consult with different organizations such as Marico, Becton Dickinson, Interglobe, FMC Corp, PGCIL, and the likes. I've consulted with all these organizations on different aspects of learning and development. I'm also a published author, wrote this book called It's Not Funny. The book garnered favorably positive reviews and appreciation from the likes of Papa CJ and Biswapati Sarkar, and these guys are great satirists, right? I also hold advanced certifications in facilitation from an American organization that goes by the name Leadership Management International. LMI is perhaps the world's largest organization working in the space of transformational leadership. And I co founded this startup by the name of Thought Sutra. Thought Sutra is our endeavor to kind of better and uplift the arts ecosystem of our country. So, yeah, that's pretty much about me. Welcome aboard this journey of learning. And there are quite a lot of features that add to the Unacademy advantage. Some of those features include giving you access to daily live classes, such as this one, where all kinds of interaction between the learners and the educators happen. It happens in real time. Doubt clearing, discussions, polls. All the question answers are conducted in the form of live polls. We also regularly conduct live tests and quizzes, and the idea of these tests and quizzes is to help you evaluate your performance, right? To help you develop perspective about where you are versus where you want to be in your learning journey. All the courses on the platform are highly structured, very much in line with your exam syllabus to help you get the best of everything. And with one subscription, you get unlimited access to all kinds of live and recorded courses that you can access from the comfort of any of your devices. There are quite a lot of top educators on our platform, and all these people are highly credible people. Over the years, they've mentored thousands and thousands of aspirants into various top tier management institutions, and you can start learning from all of these educators for free, completely for free. And then you decide whether you want to avail the additional key benefits that come along with the subscription to the platform or not. New batches, new courses, they keep on going live. Language is never a barrier either. We've got educators who teach in vernacular languages as well. So if you're not as comfortable in English, I'm pretty sure we can find somebody who would be teaching in a regional language that you were brought upon. Now, when it comes to the schedule, you design your own schedule. You decide what are the kind of courses you want to enroll into, who are the educators you want to be learning from, and you set your own schedule, and then we'll send you those timely reminders so that you don't really miss out on any of the subscriptions or any of the classes that you kind of set your eyes on. um, and when I say that we conduct tests and quizzes and give you perspective around that, what kind of perspective are we talking about? See, we'll give you data, we'll give you insights into your performance, such as the time you're spending on every question, right? What are your topic wise scores, right? The competitive stats, wherein how do you compare to the topper when it comes to that exam or that answer, who scored, what was the average time that was spent solving that question, right? how much did the topper spend, how much time did the topper spend, how much time do you spend. So all of this will help you develop a lot of perspective. Also, you will see that I'll be scribbling a lot of stuff on these class notes. So all the class notes, they'll be made available to you once you subscribe to the platform. Talking of subscription, these are the various models. You can clearly see that as the time period increases, the cost of the subscription per month goes down dramatically, right? And if you use my name Prankur, you will get an extra 10% off on any of the subscriptions that you go for. Um, See, if you're preparing for next year, I would highly recommend at least a 6 month or a 12-month journey, because that is the appropriate time period spent preparing for such exams, right? So I would recommend that. Having said that, it's your prerogative, and if you use my name Prankur, as I said, you'll get an extra 10% off. Let's begin with the first question of the day. Right, this is a fill in the blanks question from XAT 2019. Try and solve it, and then we'll discuss it. Right, let's go with it now. Map is a useful metaphor for our brain while talking when talking about dash, because at its most basic level, our brain dash to be our atlas of sorts, a system of routes dash to navigate us towards just one destination, which is staying alive. See, the first blank, it kind of needs a word that means, the way it is understood. A map is a useful metaphor for our brain when talking about dash, because at its most basic level, right? So the first blank needs a word that kind of means, the way it is understood. And so from the options, it can either be perception, or it can be comprehension, right? A map is a useful metaphor for our brain when talking about perception, or a map is a useful metaphor for our brain when talking about comprehension, right? um, even probably understanding will fit in there, but not so much, right, when talking about understanding, because perception and comprehension are kind of nouns in that sense, and that is why they fit in better. In the second blank, because at its most basic level, our brain dashed to be our atlas of sorts, right? The word that we require here is one that kind of means develop, right? That at its most because at its most basic level, our brain develops, or our brain will develop to be our atlas of sorts, right? So but as it concerns the human brain, it will make more sense to kind of use the word evolved, right? uh, because at its most basic level, our brain evolved to be our atlas of sorts, right? It developed to be our atlas, or evolved to be our atlas. And finally, when you look at the third paragraph, a system of routes dash to navigate us towards just one destination, which is staying alive. A system of routes designed to navigate us towards just one destination, that is staying alive. So option A in that context makes the maximum amount of sense. Comprehension and designed also makes sense, but metamorphosed is just unnecessary complication of the entire meaning, right? So let's move on to the next question, another fill in the blanks question. All right, I hope you'd have solved it by now. Dash medicine has been operated by trial and error. In other words, dash. We know by now that there can be entirely dash connections between symptoms and treatment, and some medicines succeed in medical trials for mere random reasons, right? Um, the first blank clearly requires a word that refers to the events of the past. Dash medicine has been operated by trial and error, right? So the best suited word probably might be, historically, right? Historically, medicines they've been or medicine has been operated by trial and error. In other words, dash. Now in the second blank, we kind of we need a word that goes with the idea of random choices, because we're talking about trial and error, right? So in that context, both random and arbitrarily make a lot of sense, right? Both random and arbitrarily make a lot of sense there. So let's look at the third one. We know by now that there can be entirely dash connections, right? So uh, we require a word that means lucky or by chance, right? So in that context, fortuitous makes a lot of sense, right? We we know by now that there can be entirely fortuitous connections between symptoms and treatment, and some medications succeed in medical trials for mere random reasons. So putting it all together, option E makes a lot of sense, right? So option E is the correct option in this regard. Let's move on to the next question, a question pertaining to grammar now. Hi Madhu, welcome to the class. All right, B. Let's look at this. So in sentence one, I have good knowledge of German, right? So I have good knowledge of German is kind of a grammatically correct sentence as a response to a question, right? But when you think of it as a standalone sentence, it is not very complete. I have good knowledge of the German language is perhaps a more complete sentence, right? And let's look at sentence two. Except for Rajiv, everybody was there. This is correct. When you look at the third one, whole Delhi was celebrating Independence Day, right? So whole is again incomplete. The whole of Delhi is probably a correct construction. The whole of Delhi was celebrating Independence Day, right? Neither the dog nor is the cat responsible for this mess. Neither the dog nor is the cat responsible for this mess. Again, seems kind of correct to me, right? He knows to swim. Again, he knows how to swim is the correct construction here. Probably he knows how to swim. So, and finally, the sixth sentence is I look forward to seeing you. This is also correct. So, we can clearly see that sentences 1, 3, and 5. These are the ones that are grammatically incorrect. So, option C is the correct answer in that regard and not B, right? I hope this makes sense. Let's move on to the next question now. This is a paragraph, so let's read this. Yeah. Let's read this and try to understand it. Once during a concert of cathedral organ music, as I sat getting goose flesh amid that tsunami of sound, I was struck with a thought. For a medieval peasant, these are two separate words. For a medieval peasant, this must have been the loudest human made sound that they ever experienced, awe inspiring in now unimaginable ways. No wonder they signed up for the religion being proffered. And now we are constantly pummeled with sounds that dwarf quaint organs. Once hunter gatherers might chance upon honey from a beehive and thus briefly satisfy a hardwired food craving, and now we have hundreds of carefully designed commercial foods that supply a burst of sensation unmatched by some lowly natural food. Once we had lives that, amid considerable privation, also offered numerous subtle, hard won pleasures, and now we have drugs that cause spasms of pleasure and dopamine release a thousandfold higher than anything stimulated in our own drug free world, right? So, they're kind of the author is trying to draw comparison and what was a humongous thing back then and is kind of a routine normal thing now, right? uh, so That's that. Let's understand what paragraph 2 tells us, and then we'll move on to the questions. The Farsis will be the same in Snap also. Kind of, yes. Hi Prashant, welcome to the class. Almost the same. Yeah. And emptiness comes from this combination of over the top, non natural sources of reward and the inevitability of habituation. This is because unnaturally strong explosions of synthetic experience and sensation and pleasure evoke unnaturally strong degrees of habituation. Right? The author is now kind of mulling about how habits are formed out of this. This has two consequences. First, soon we barely notice the fleeting whispers of pleasure caused by leaves in autumn, or by the lingering glance of the right person, or by the promise of reward following a difficult, worthy task. And the other consequence is that we eventually habituate to even those artificial deluges of intensity. If we were designed by engineers as we consumed more, we'd desire less. But our frequent human tragedy is that the more we consume, the hungrier we get, more and faster and stronger. What was an unexpected pleasure yesterday is what we feel entitled to today, and what won't be enough tomorrow. Right? So the author is kind of drawing up a very negative connotation around all of this. uh, I'll give you another 10-15 seconds to kind of, get comfortable with this as we move on to the questions. All right. The first question: which of the following options best reflects the author's understanding of human perception of pleasure? Pleasure comes from whatever we are exposed to for the first time. Pleasure comes from what we are deprived of. Pleasure comes from what happens to be a valuable discovery or invention. Pleasure comes from what is perceived to be extraordinary. Pleasure comes from what we are accustomed to. Right. So for this, I'll kind of take you back to the last line. What was an unexpected pleasure yesterday is what we feel entitled to today, and what won't be enough tomorrow. Right? So, according to the author, the what is the author trying to tell us in this line, right? The author is trying to tell us that pleasure comes from what is perceived to be exceptional or extraordinary, right? The passage conveys the idea that what was an unexpected pleasure yesterday is what we feel entitled to today, and what won't be enough tomorrow. So what is the author trying to tell us? That once it happens, it is no longer unexpected, right? And or extraordinary, right? So therefore it is perceived to be an exceptional and extraordinary thing, and that is why we are calling it pleasure, right? So D in that context makes the maximum amount of sense, that pleasure comes from what is perceived to be extraordinary. All right, let's move on to the next question. Going by the author, which of the following options best answers the question, how can one sustain the pleasure derived from any experience? So, when you come to think of it, throughout the passage, the author was kind of trying to tell us that, the author was putting forward the idea or the notion that, the more easily available something is, the the harder it is, and the impossible, the more difficult it is for us to savor the pleasure for a long, long time. So, easy availability means that we're not able to savor the experience for a long, long time. That is kind of something that the author was trying to get at again and again, right? So therefore, to kind of sustain the joy, it must be derived from a source that is hard to replicate, right? That is hard to kind of come by, that is hard to come forth, right? So that is why C here makes the maximum amount of sense, that the harder to replicate, the more sustainable the pleasure from that experience will be, right? So that is why I'll go with option C over anything else. Let's move on to the next question. Which of the following best describes emptiness as described in the passage? Again, a very direct question, a very retrievable question. Um, Emptiness, by definition, means the lack or absence of something, right? And the author was saying that unnaturally, strong explosions of experience and sensation evoke unnaturally strong desires of habituation as well, right? So in that context, uh, option B kind of seems a very viable answer option here, right? The a feeling of absence of sources of pleasure when extant sources are in abundance, right? A feeling evoked by the carefully designed commercial fools alluring us to them, yearning for newer sources of pleasure. Again, is that yearning, is emptiness yearning, a feeling of weariness around extant sources of pleasure, right? A feeling of absence is more suitable. Let's look at another short paragraph, another small paragraph. When it comes to that, you will come across such small paragraphs in abundance, and then the paper will be asking you at least two to three questions from such a small paragraph as well sometimes, right? So that is kind of a very tricky thing when it comes to that, and that is why I'm making sure to kind of include such small paragraphs in our practice. Quickly read this. People who work in law, hotel, and food services and technology were found the most likely to skip breakfast daily, according to a recent study. As for people who do eat breakfast and prefer a savory type, like an egg, the study found they tend to make more money, be night owls, and prefer cats over dogs. If you prefer a sweet breakfast, like a donut, you tend to be a morning person like rom coms and are a dog person, right? So this is what the premise is. Let's move on to the question. Which of the following can be best inferred? Inference means which of these options has to be true based on the information that we've read. See, now I'll give you, a hint to solving this question. The idea is that when you're comparing two things, you have to make sure that the parameters are the same, right? Parameters need to be same when it comes to comparison. All right. So let's look at all the options one by one. Option A: IT professionals who eat eggs for breakfast are more likely to make more money than their counterparts who eat donuts for breakfast. So this kind of seems all right, right? You are comparing IT professionals and savory breakfast to and saying they make more money than the counterparts who eat donuts for breakfast, who are morning people. These are night owls and these are morning people, and that is it is kind of based on the information that was given to us in the paragraph, plus the parameters are the same, right? Lawyers who eat savory breakfast daily make more money than those lawyers who have early breakfast daily, right? So now when it comes to option B, the parameters of the comparison are not really the same, right? You are saying a savory, that is like a salty or a spicy breakfast, right? We talked of eggs there, right? Cannot be compared to early breakfast. Salty breakfast, you're comparing savory breakfast to early breakfast. These are not the same things, right? The parameters are not the same, so the comparison is incomplete, right? Similarly, when you look at sentence C, hoteliers who eat regular breakfast are more likely to make more money than those who watch rom-coms regularly, right? So there is no correlation between being making more money and the tendency to eat breakfast regularly, right? And when it comes to option D, among regular breakfast eaters, early risers have more sugar in their breakfast than late risers. See, uh, as for this, uh, in the passage it is stated that people who prefer sweet breakfast tend to be an early riser and not the other way around, right? According to the passage, that was the case. So again, this kind of falls apart. When it comes to E, a preference for cats as pets over dogs usually is a result of eating eggs. Now, was there there is again no mention of preference of pet being a direct result of the choice of food, right? So in option A, all the relations are directly mentioned in the passage, and hence it seems to be like the best possible answer option, right? So I'll quickly get rid of B, C, D, and E, right? A, in all likelihood, based on the information that was presented to us in the passage, seems like the most appropriate answer option. Now we come to a poem. Right, let's look at this poem now before we move on to the question. Some say the world will end in fire, some say in ice. From what I've tasted of desire, I hold with those who favor fire. But if it had to perish twice, I think I know enough of hate to know that for destruction, ice is also great and would suffice. Right, so it's kind of uh, it's the kind of poem that is basically talking about the human behavior, right? Uh, Fire and ice are just metaphors in that regard. Let's look at the question. Which of the following statements will the poet agree with the most? See, here we are kind of looking for an option in which, the idea is kind of not directly given in the poem, but can be reasonably inferred from the context that the poem kind of developed for us, right? So when you look at options uh, B, C, and D, both desire and hate can create self doubt. Hatred destroys what desire cannot. Ambition is more powerful than envy. These emotions are already discussed in the poem, right? Option E, uh, right, desire overpowers hatred to control humans, right? So B, C, D, desire, hate, these are kind of discussed in the poem, but ambition is more powerful than envy. Envy was not really discussed in the poem, right? So again, it is kind of making a comparison. Ambition is more powerful, right? A comparison such as this, nothing pertaining to this context was kind of developed upon or talked about, right? But when it comes to option A, it talks about greed, which can be considered, like a product of desire, right? And hence greed can destroy one's world seems like an appropriate answer option based on the kind of context that the poem was developing, right? So there's that. And therefore to me it seems like the most appropriate answer option. Let's look at the next question, which is the most unsuitable title of the poem. Most unsuitable. The annihilation hypothesis, love and detest, a tale of destruction, how the world ends, destruction by fire and ice, emotional destruction of the world. uh, uh, um, when it comes to this, the idea is that we have to look for the most unsuitable title, right? So fire and ice, how the world ends, love and detest, a taste tale of destruction, the annihilation hypothesis, emotional destruction of the world. uh, so I'm kind of confused between how the world ends and emotional destruction of the world, which is more unsuitable. Some say the world will end in fire, some say in ice, right? So how the world will end kind of seems apt in this regard, that the first line itself of the poem starts in that context, right? But when it comes to emotional destruction, to know that for destruction ice is also great and would suffice, to call it emotional destruction of the world seems inappropriate and the most unsuitable to me right now, so I'll go with option E in that regard, right? Let's look at a parajumble's question now. Hi Sarthak, welcome to the class. Option A. Alright. We start with look at any industry and you will see three kinds of companies. First are the rule makers, the incumbents that built the industry. Okay. Like other creators and procreators, right? These are the rule makers. They are the oligarchy. They here refers to these companies. Good job. And after this we have B. Next are the rule takers, all right, and then we have E are the numerous others that are peasants. Good job. I think you've gotten it right. Well done. Choose the correct sentence. Confused between 3 and 4, all right. So whenever we have a neither nor construction, right? Neither uh you will go with 3, all right. Neither x nor y, right? Whenever we have a neither nor construction or an either or construction, either x or y. So the verb always takes the form of the y component, the noun or the noun phrase that accompanies y, that accompanies nor, and that accompanies or. So the y component is what the verb kind of depends upon. So therefore, 3 is incorrect and 4 is the correct answer. Neither Gopal nor Ramesh. Ramesh is a singular noun, right? So for a singular noun, you need a singular verb. So has is more appropriate than have, and his here correctly refers to uh, Ramesh, right? Neither Gopal nor Ramesh has finished his work. So fourth is the correct option, and three is incorrect in that regard. All right. Hope you've understood this. Right, let's begin with a comprehension again now. This is the first paragraph. If you're solving it, let me know once you're done reading this first paragraph, and then I'll switch over to the next one. All right. Okay. Cool. I think this is the last paragraph. All right. So the first question: all of the following serve as evidence for the character of Aladdin being based on Hana Diab, except. So out of four, three serve as evidence, one does not. Which option does not serve as evidence? P or D? So when you look at the passage, Sarthak, Diab's humble origins and class struggles, they were basically mentioned, right? When you look at all the paragraphs one by one. Here we are saying credit for telling the tale has often gone to Galand, right? But though tales were medieval origin, Aladdin might be a recent invention. Scholars have not found a manuscript of the story that predates. Scholars have not found a manuscript of the story that predates the version published this who wrote in his diary that he first heard the tale from a Syrian storyteller. So Galand already credits Diab, right? Galand already credits Diab, but what were the evidences? Look at this. Though Galan never credited Diab, Diab wrote something of his own, a travelogue penned in the mid 18th century. In it, he describes his own hard rocks upbringing and the way he marveled at the extravagance of Versailles. Right? So there was this. Aladdin might be the young Arab Maronite from Aleppo marveling at the jewels and the riches of Versailles. This was one. And then there was this where we talk about flipping the script. Why? Because experience of a Middle Eastern man encountering the French, right? So Diab was ideally placed to embody the overlapping world of East and West, blending the storytelling traditions of his homeland with his youthful observations of the wonder of 18th century France. So this is what we're talking about this is where we're talking about the cosmopolitan experiences, right? So, and here we are talking about how he was more suited because he was more empathetic to everything that was happening there, right? So, when you read his diary, you see the solidarity among the Arabs who were in Paris at the time, right? So, here we are talking about the psychological aspects of it. So, when it comes to evidence, this we already knew. Galand already had recounted hearing this story from somebody else, but his humble origins and class struggles, his description of the wealth, and his cosmopolitan and cross cultural experiences, these three serve as evidence. A does not serve as evidence. He narrated the original story to Galan, that's all right. But was the character based on him? This narration does not tell us that. All the other three tell us that. Okay, so A in that context becomes the most appropriate option. Let's look at the next question now. Which of the following is the primary reason for why storytellers are still fascinated by the story of Aladdin? Okay, when you look at this, which of the following is the primary reason for why storytellers are still fascinated by this story? Um, to the scholars who study the tale, its narrative drama isn't the only reason why storytellers keep finding reasons to return to Aladdin. It reflects not only a history of the French and the Middle East, but also Middle Easterners coming to Paris, and that speaks to our world today. Right? So, this is the reason that is being given that the traveler's experience that inspired the tale of Aladdin resonates even today. Archetype of rags to riches story. Tale of Aladdin documents the history of Europe and Middle East, not really. Story of Aladdin is evidence of the 18th century French Orientalist attitude. No. The traveler's experience resonates even today is more like it. A is the most appropriate answer in this regard. Let's look at the next question. Not C or D exactly. It was not C or D. It was A, based on the last line, the first lines of paragraph 4, right? To the scholars, the storytellers keep finding reasons to Aladdin. It reflects not only a history of the French but also Middle Easterners coming to Paris, and that speaks to our world today. This Middle Easterners coming to Paris, right? So, travelers' experience is what is why the traveler's experience is why Aladdin resonates even today. How about this one? Which of the following does not contribute to the passage's claim about the authorship? Does not contribute being the operative word, not being the operative word. A or C? C is the correct answer. That the storyline of many French fairy tales of the 18th century, they don't contribute in any way to the authorship. Narrative sensibility, see the empathy that Diab expressed in his travelogue, that kind of contributes to the authorship. Galan's acknowledgement of Diab also contributes. Depiction of affluence of Versailles in Diab's travelogue also contributes. Just that the storyline of French fairy tales of the 18th century does not tell us anything about the authorship. So I eliminate two, but then I face a problem in RCs. It'll go with practice, buddy. It'll go with practice. As many RCs as you can solve, you must try that, right? And then it'll go away with practice. Look at this one. Try to eliminate three here instead of eliminating two. The author of the passage is more likely to agree with which of the following explanations for the origins of Aladdin? What is the author most likely to agree with is what you have to basically zero in on here. Not C. It is not C. Yes, I agree with you there. It is not C. I'll take you back to the passage, right? There is little in the writings of Gaul and would suggest that he was capable of that would suggest that he was capable of developing a character like Aladdin with sympathy. But Diab's memoir reveals a narrator adept at capturing the distinctive psychology of a young protagonist, as well as recognizing the kinds of injustices and opportunities that can transform the path of any youthful adventurer, right? So, the author throughout the passage is kind of very much expressing the fact that the character was based on Diab's life itself, right? So, basing it on his own life experiences, Diab transmitted it to Galand, who included it in Arabian Nights, is something that the author will probably agree with, right? When you look at B and D, Galan derived the story from Diab's travelogue in which he recounts his fascination with the wealth of Versailles. This could happen, but the author is more inclined at the character based on Diab's life itself. That everything was based on his own life experiences. Right? That is something that the author has been kind of trying to hint at. That the character of Aladdin is based on Hannah Diab's own experiences, right? And even when you look at D, Galan received the story of Aladdin from Diab, who in turn found it in an incomplete manuscript. This can be definitely eliminated because confusion होनी चाहिए तो होनी A और B में चाहिए, right? And A और B में से more appropriate is A because A tells us that the story was based on Diab's life experiences because the author has been again and again hinting at that. ठीक है? So let's look at this question. Which of the following, if true, would invalidate the inversion that the phrase flips the script refers to? Right? I'll take you back to the passage to flips the script. Right? This is flips the script. For 300 years, scholars thought that the rags to riches story of Aladdin might have been inspired by the plots of French fairy tales that came around at the same time, or that. Right. We were talking about flips the script, right? So here it says for 300 years, scholars thought that the rags to riches story of Aladdin might have been inspired by the plots of French fairy tales that came out around at the same time, or that the story was invented in the 18th century period as a byproduct of French Orientalism, a fascination with stereotypical exotic Middle Eastern luxuries that was prevalent then. The idea that Diab might have based it on his own life, the experiences of a Middle Eastern man encountering the French, not vice versa, flips the script. So, what is flipping the script? कि पहले लगता था that the story was from the French point of view, right? It was from the French perspective कि we are very much enamored by और हमें बहुत मजा आता है मिडिल ईस्टर्न लग्जरीज के बारे में बात करके, द फ्रेंच ओरिएंटलिज्म, a fascination with stereotypical Middle Eastern luxuries. That was the first point of view. The second point of view was from Hannah Diab's point of view, the experience of a Middle Eastern man encountering the French. That, you know, Diab was basically uh, Diab was basically enamored by the riches of Versailles, the riches of France, the riches of Paris, right? So that is how you flip the script. You are flipping the point of view. पहले तुम्हारा French point of view था, फिर तुमने सोचा कि नहीं, कहानी is from a Middle Eastern point of view. अब हमें क्या करना है? Which of the following, if true, would invalidate the phrase flips the script? कि invalidate कर दिया हमने उसे. Let's follow the process of elimination, looking at all the options one by one. Option A. Diab's travelogue described the affluence of the French city of Bordeaux instead of Versailles. Does that flip the script? We don't know that for a fact. French fairy tales did not have rags to riches plot lines like that of Aladdin. Again, this is not that. Let's look at C. The description of opulence narratives bore no resemblance to each other. Galland acknowledged in the published translations of Arabian Nights that he heard the story of Aladdin from the up. So when you look at C, right, flipping the script can happen. देखो, जब हम फ्रेंच पर्सपेक्टिव से सोचें या हम मिडिल ईस्टर्न पर्सपेक्टिव से सोचें, इन बोथ द पॉइंट्स ऑफ व्यू वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट रिचेस ऑफ द अदर साइड. अगर हम फ्रेंच पर्सपेक्टिव से देख रहे हैं तो वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट द मिडिल ईस्टर्न लग्जरीज. अगर हम मिडिल ईस्टर्न पर्सपेक्टिव से देख रहे हैं तो वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट द रिचेस ऑफ द सिटी ऑफ वर्साइल एंड पेरिस, right? So in both cases we are talking about riches, right? So when you think about all that, when you put it together, अगर ये चीज ट्रू हो, अगर पॉइंट सी ट्रू हो, that the description of opulence in Hannah Diab's and Antoine Galland's narratives bore no resemblance, then flipping the script would not have been possible, right? They resembled each other because from Antoine Galland's perspective it was about the Middle Eastern luxuries. From Hannah Diab's perspective it was about the luxuries of the cities of Versailles and Paris, right? So in both cases we were talking about opulence and the riches of the other side, and that is why we can flip the script. But here, if this were not true, if opulence was not described in both the narratives, तब हम script को flip ही नहीं कर पाते ना, because there is no similarity in the narrative then, right? So option C in that context makes the maximum amount of sense, that the narratives were matching. That is why we could flip the script. If the narratives would not have matched, we would not have been able to flip the script. ठीक है. So yeah, with this we come to the end of today's class. Thank you, Sarthak, for joining in. You've been here for at least half an hour now. I'll be taking another class tomorrow at 10 o'clock in the morning, right? So if possible, do join in and we'll solve more questions together. Till then, stay safe, buddy. Stay safe, stay strong, and hopefully I'll see you again. Yeah? Bye-bye. Yeah, elected to bowl. Bye, sir. Anji, hi. Hi.